We are joined today by Alan McCleave, who is the country director for Wallbox in the UK and Ireland. Alan, thank you very much for joining me.
No, thank you for the invite. Good to see you again.
So today we're going to talk about different tips on how to implement a working and good infrastructure for EV fleets. And I just mentioned you come from Wallbox. So let's start from, what do you do in Wallbox? How long have you been doing it for?
We're a global business, present now in more than 100 companies around the world. Our headquarters is in Barcelona, and we've got 4 different manufacturing facilities around the world now, 2 in Barcelona, 1 in China, 1 in the US. And we were established 2015, so around for just over 7 years. But effectively, we create smart charging and energy management solutions that combines innovative technology, really smart design, but it's really all about facilitating the EV growth that's going on globally, but also trying to help people make better use of energy, which obviously is a pretty hot topic at the moment. So,
you have quite a large portfolio both on AC and DC. When it comes to fleets and logistics, what are your recommendations?
As you say, there's a lot of choice out there, and I guess each company is unique in terms of its operations, the types of vehicles it runs, how far those vehicles run, whether they're last mile delivery, whether they're doing lots of deliveries to many different customers. So I guess most companies start with AC charging. That's the more cost effective end of the scale, and will typically go to speeds up to 22 kilowatts, depends on what vehicles and that you've got. That's kind of, I guess, most of the conversations where they've started from. So we've, give you one example. We've got a large global last mile delivery company that we work with at present. When they were first switching away from traditionally fuel vehicles into EVs, this was part of their challenge as how would they cope with different drivers jumping in and out of their vehicles, different drivers coming back to the depot to drop the vehicle off, making sure to plug it in, before they knock off their shift, as it were, to make sure that vehicle's then, fully charged for the next day. Making sure that they didn't drop I think their success rate at the time was over 98% of their deliveries were achieved on time. So they couldn't, have a solution that was going to impact that negatively, because that's their core business. So that's kind of where they started and where we sort of recommended to them, because it was typically a sort of overnight charge of where the person, driver number 1, gives it up, goes back to the depot, plugs it in, goes home. Next day into the depot comes driver number 2, completely different driver to obviously pick that vehicle up. So that was a change for them really in terms of culture. But also in terms of on a operational
and
vehicle.
Tracking here is very important. How can solutions like Wallbox help with that?
Yeah, I think in terms of from our side of things, so other than just manufacturing the equipment itself, we also developed software that sits behind it. And as you quite rightly say, this customer wanted to track, in terms of the first rollout of vehicles in particular, they wanted to understand what was their relative cost of the EV vehicle versus the traditionally fuel vehicle. But also, as you say, to control who was using the chargers, because what they couldn't have was chargers there for operational vehicles and then anybody just coming along and using them. So using our Wallbox back office, they were able to set who could use the chargers, so who would physically have access, just using smartphone access from the driver, so that the charger would recognize them and go, okay, yeah, I know who you are. But then also tracking that, reporting back, so that the customer could understand, okay, how much energy was that vehicle using? What's the relative cost based on their energy tariffs? Who was using the vehicle and at what times? So all of that stuff was being tracked by our back-end software. So this is the charger kind of, if you like, connected to the cloud, sending information up to the cloud, and then the customer can go and access that data, as they like.
And if I just take a step back to installation, where does all of this fit to, and what are the challenges with installation?
The logistics industry in particular, which is very depot-based, and will quite often be a traditional footprint of depots that could have been there for 20, 30, 40 years or more. So you can imagine when these depots were built, they weren't built with an electric fleet in mind. There are a lot of new business parks being built more with that in mind, which is great to see. But here we're talking about, a group of businesses that wasn't the thought process. The thought process was store goods, vehicles go, pick goods up, go off and deliver them. Pretty simple business model that obviously all logistics companies have known for many, many years how to execute. But now we're in a different scenario. An example I was giving you earlier, but I can think of another one in the UK recently. Again, they were challenged with quite an old depot layout. And typically when you're going to these depots, they need a bit of heat, some lights, and power some PCs. That's pretty much it. So typically you're going to these sites that might have three-phase electricity supply, 100 amps, which isn't particularly huge. 100 amps, to put that into context, a home might typically run off 100 amps, but on single phase. So you're talking not a big difference between a traditional home and a commercial unit. But in terms of sort of supporting those guys, they needed support on the installation so that we could install it in a way that didn't exceed their energy supply. That's super important. Otherwise, then the lights go off and that's not going to help anybody. But also make sure that their vehicles are fully charged by the times that they want. So you've got to look at operating hours, when the vehicles tend to run, when they leave the depot, when do they come back, all that kind of good stuff. So we were able to support them on that. And with our installers, we were able to put in some power management solutions as well. So to make best use of the available energy supply that they've got in those particular depots. And I think the environment probably 80%, if not more, of their sites will face. I don't have a lot of power, very traditional. Yes, you can upgrade your power, but that can be hugely expensive. So here we were able to roll out a solution of, installing the chargers in a way that worked for the site, gave them access to all that back-end software so they could track the usage and who was using them, but also, make sure that they're operating within their own constraints, because there are regulations that when we install, we have to adhere to. And in a way, like I say, that wasn't hugely expensive for them. So it's a great way of getting up and running.
And another thing on a follow-up to that is continuous use and improvement of the network. How do you do that?
What we always try and do is take into account not necessarily what you're going to do today with the site, is where's that, what are your plans in a year, 2 years, 3 years? Because otherwise you can give them a solution like I've just described in terms of that power management. But if that isn't going to expand beyond, let's say, 10 vehicles, and their plan in a year's time is to have 50 vehicles running from that site, that's not going to work. But what we have done on that last case study I was speaking about, what we've been able to do is put in power management solutions whilst the customer is also reaching out and speaking to their network operator, because in the country it's split depending on where you are, who operates and manages your local grid. So they're currently working in a few of their locations with the grid operator to plan future power increases to support that growth. But we've been able to put solutions in that today will work within that, but then be able to release some of those power management constraints to give them a better solution, or for more vehicles, or to charge in a smaller space of time, or whatever it may be. So that's kind of that side of it. I guess the bit we didn't talk about, so that's AC, that's kind of where it starts, but is more demanding fleets or quicker turnaround. So like a bus depot or something like that, where you've got a vehicle going out, it's going on a route, it's going to come back, but it's going to come back for a very short period of time. So in those solutions, you need more of a rapid charging solution. So like one of our DC chargers, and then again, you've got to have the power support to put through that, because obviously it operates at a much higher level of intensity, but with the ability to turn that vehicle around much more quickly than you could do with an overnight. Each business is different. Each operation that they're conducting is different. And that's why you always start from what does the customer do? What does the site do before you can get to that? What does a solution look like? What do they need? Do they need a solution today that does some of the job but buys them time for that growth further down the line? Because the biggest advice I can ever give anyone is think ahead, dig once, and then expand as you need to on that sort of infrastructure basis. I've seen people do it before where they go, oh yeah, you know, we need 5 chargers. Then a year down the line, oh, actually now we need another 5. And then you're going back potentially and digging up that site again. And you're just kind of saying, if we'd have known this a year ago, we would have said, you know, a little bit more investment. It's not a big investment, but it will save them way more money further down the line. Because
Alan, thank you very much for your time. And for everyone watching, you can learn more about what Wallbox do and also more information on AC, DC charging and all of the things we spoke about in the description below. Thank you.